Snow drifts softly against the window panes of an old stone cottage. Inside, the glow of a single candle trembles upon the pages of a thick, time-worn book, its red leather cover scuffed from centuries of curious hands. Outside, a church bell tolls from somewhere beyond the hills, slow and deep, as if calling across the ages. Tonight, we open that ancient book together, its pages filled with wonder, generosity, and legend, to trace the footsteps of one of the most beloved figures in all of holiday history. Not a fairy tale, but a story rooted in truth. Not a myth born from magic, but from mercy. The story of Saint Nicholas. For many, his name calls to mind the twinkle of Christmas lights, the rustle of wrapping paper, or the soft jingle of reindeer bells against a starry sky. But long before he ever wore a red suit or climbed down chimneys, Nicholas was a man of flesh and blood, a humble bishop who lived nearly 17 centuries ago, in a sunlit land by the Mediterranean Sea. He was born in a world very different from our own, a time when Christianity was still young, when Roman emperors ruled and faith was often tested in fire. Yet in that distant age, amid the marble temples and bustling markets of Lycia, there lived a boy whose quiet compassion would echo through the ages. This is not just his biography, it is his journey. From the warm shores of ancient Myra to the snow-covered rooftops of our own imaginations. From a man who left coins in secret for those in need, to a saint who travelled across oceans and centuries to become the spirit of giving itself. So settle in, dear listener. Pull the blanket close and let the candlelight dance across the walls. For tonight, we will travel through time, following a trail of kindness that began long ago, when one man's goodness shone like a lantern in the dark. Long before Santa Claus, there was Saint Nicholas, and his story begins not at the North Pole, but under the brilliant blue skies of the ancient Mediterranean. Picture it. The year is around 270 AD. The city of Patara, nestled along the coast of what is now southern Turkey, hums with the sounds of life. Merchants shouting their wares, ships creaking in the harbour, and children chasing each other through narrow streets lined with olive trees. In a grand stone house overlooking the sea, a child is born to a wealthy Christian couple who had long prayed for a son. They name him Nicholas, which means victory of the people. From the beginning, there is something different about him. A gentleness in his eyes, a quiet strength. He grows up surrounded by comfort, but his heart is drawn not to riches, but to mercy. While other children play in the courtyards, Nicholas slips away to bring food to the poor, or comfort to those who are ill. When a plague sweeps through the city, he tends to the sick. When famine strikes, he gives what little he has. And when both his parents die, while he is still young, Nicholas inherits their fortune, and almost immediately begins giving it away. The people of Patara whisper that he is blessed. They call him holy. Yet Nicholas himself asks for no praise. He gives in secret, believing that true generosity asks for no thanks. This, dear listener, is where our story begins, with a man whose heart overflowed with quiet compassion. But the journey of St. Nicholas does not end in Patara, nor even in Myra, where he will one day serve as bishop. His story will sail across the seas, carried in the hearts of sailors and the prayers of children. It will survive empires, cross mountains, and find new life in distant lands, transforming over centuries into the warm, familiar figure who fills our homes with cheer each December. How did this humble bishop become the patron of sailors and orphans, the protector of travellers, and the bringer of gifts? How did his red robes of faith become the red suit of Santa Claus? Tonight, we will follow that transformation, tracing the golden thread that connects the ancient saint to the modern symbol of Christmas. We will walk through marble halls and medieval cathedrals, across icy forests and candlelit homes, through stories whispered by monks and painted by poets, until the spirit of Saint Nicholas reveals itself not as one man's tale, but as a timeless reflection of kindness itself. Because in every act of giving, in every moment of compassion, Saint Nicholas still walks among us. And as the snow outside thickens and the wind hums softly through the chimney, we turn the page to the first chapter of his story. To the days when the world was young, and a boy from Patara began to change it forever. Section 1. The Real Saint Nicholas. The year is 280 AD. The Mediterranean sun burns gold upon the whitewashed walls of Patara, a small port city in the Roman province of Lycia ships rock lazily in the harbour, their sails stitched from rough linen and smelling faintly of salt and resin. The marketplace hums with voices, merchants haggling over grain, olive oil, and purple cloth, while the scent of myrrh drifts from the temples nearby. Among these streets walks a young man in a plain linen robe, his head bowed in quiet thought. This is Nicholas, son of Theophanes and Nonna, a boy once surrounded by wealth, now a man who has chosen a different treasure. He carries with him no coins, only a small sack filled with bread. Each day he moves through the alleys, slipping loaves into the hands of widows and fishermen, blessing them softly before disappearing into the crowd. Nicholas's parents had been kind and devout, known for their generosity. When a plague swept through Lycia, they cared for the sick until both fell ill themselves. Orphaned while still a young man, Nicholas inherited their fortune. But instead of guarding it, he gave it away, quietly, secretly. As he would later tell others, "It is not ours to keep what belongs to the poor." One of the most enduring tales from his youth tells of a poor man with 3 daughters. Once wealthy, the man had lost everything, and his family faced ruin. In those days, a woman without a dowry could not marry, and this desperate father feared his daughters would be forced into slavery. Nicholas heard of their plight. That night, while the town slept beneath the hum of cicadas, he crept to their window and tossed a small pouch of gold inside. The next morning, the family found it, enough to provide for one daughter's dowry. Overjoyed but puzzled, they could not guess who had done it. The following night, Nicholas returned with another pouch, and on the third, as he tossed the final bag through the window, the father, now waiting in secret, rushed outside and caught him by the sleeve. "Why do you hide your kindness?" the man cried. Nicholas lowered his head. "Because it is not I you should thank," he said softly. "Give glory to God, who provides for all." That story, simple, humble, and full of heart, became the seed of something greater. For centuries to come, children would hang stockings and shoes in memory of those small bags of gold. In the dark of winter, the secret gift of Nicholas would become a light for all. As Nicholas grew older, his faith deepened. He travelled to the city of Myra, where the great Roman road met the sea. The city was alive with marble colonnades, spice markets, and the echoes of hymns sung in hidden chapels. It was here that Nicholas's quiet goodness came to the notice of the people. According to legend, when the Bishop of Myra died, the priests gathered to choose his successor. They prayed for guidance, and a voice was said to have spoken. "The first man who enters the church in the morning shall be the one." At dawn, Nicholas entered the church to pray. The doors creaked open, the light fell across his face, and the priests turned toward him in astonishment. "What is your name?" they asked. "Nicholas, servant of Christ." And so he was made Bishop of Myra, the shepherd of souls in a city perched between empire and faith. He served not as a man of authority, but as a man of compassion. When famine struck, Nicholas persuaded ship captains bound for Alexandria to spare some of their grain for the starving. Though they feared Roman punishment for tampering with the emperor's cargo, Nicholas promised they would lose nothing. Miraculously, when the ships reached their destination, their holds were still full. When sailors were caught in a storm at sea, they prayed to him, and when they survived, they swore they had seen his figure upon the waves, calming the wind. For centuries afterward, mariners painted his image on the prows of their ships and prayed to Saint Nicholas, patron of sailors. But Nicholas's life was not without hardship. The Roman Empire in his time was not kind to Christians. Under Emperor Diocletian, believers were imprisoned, tortured, or worse, Nicholas himself was arrested, stripped of his bishop's robes, and thrown into a dark cell. Even there, he continued to pray for his flock, and when the persecutions ended, he emerged frail but unbroken, returning to Myra to rebuild his church and comfort the faithful. His gentleness was matched by courage. At the Great Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, where bishops gathered to define the faith, Nicholas defended the belief that Christ was both divine and human, the very heart of Christian teaching. Though accounts differ, one legend even claims that in his fervour, Nicholas struck a heretic named Arius across the face, a rare moment of fire from a man of peace. Yet even that story ends not in anger, but in forgiveness. Nicholas repented, prayed, and was restored to his place. For him, truth was never a weapon. It was light. As the years passed, Nicholas became known not just in Lycia, but throughout the Eastern world. He was said to have saved 3 innocent men condemned to death by bribed officials, appearing before the executioner at the last moment to stop the blade. He rescued sailors from shipwreck, brought grain to starving cities, and healed the sick. Every story shared the same pattern: danger, mercy, and quiet deliverance. Nicholas never sought glory. He simply appeared where he was needed most. When at last he grew old, he continued his ministry until the day he could no longer rise from his bed. On a cold December morning, some say December 6th, around the year 343, the people of Myra gathered outside his home, weeping and praying as the bells tolled. Nicholas whispered a final blessing for his people and passed peacefully into rest. But that was not the end. After his death, the townspeople buried him in a marble tomb inside his church. Soon, the air around it was said to carry a sweet, oil-like fragrance, a liquid known as manna of Saint Nicholas, believed to possess healing powers. Pilgrims came from across the Mediterranean to pray at his shrine, leaving offerings and candles that flickered through the night. From Egypt to Greece, from Russia to Ireland, stories of his miracles spread like ripples through water. Sailors carried his name upon their lips. Orphans prayed to him in the dark. He became not only a saint, but a symbol, the very image of Christian charity. Centuries would pass, empires would rise and fall, and still his name endured. For in every age, people would whisper his story and remember the man who gave quietly, who protected the weak, who believed that love itself was a gift worth giving. As the candle burns low in our little cottage, we close the chapter on the real Saint Nicholas, the man of Myra, the protector of the poor, the friend of sailors and children. But though he has left the world, his legend is only beginning, for his bones will not remain forever in Myra, and the story of his relics, stolen, carried across the sea and enshrined in a distant land, will transform his memory from a local bishop into one of the most beloved saints in all of Christendom. And so, our journey continues. Turn the page now, dear listener. The candlelight flickers, and the year is 1087. A ship rocks gently in the harbour, its sails catching the wind toward Italy. The men aboard whisper prayers, and among their cargo rests a treasure far greater than gold, the bones of Saint Nicholas. Section 2. The Medieval Saint. The year is 1087. 1,000 winters have passed since Nicholas of Myra closed his eyes for the last time. The once bright city where he served as bishop lies quieter now, its marble arches worn by wind and salt, its markets thinned by war and trade. The Roman Empire has long since fractured. New faiths and nations now shape the world. But within the old church at Myra, the people still come. They kneel beside his tomb, touching the stone with trembling fingers, whispering prayers to the saint who never ceased to listen. Yet across the sea, danger stirs. The Seljuk Turks sweep through Asia Minor, conquering cities and threatening the Christian shrines that have stood for centuries. Word spreads that the relics of Saint Nicholas, his bones said to still exude holy oil, may soon be lost. Far to the west, in the Italian port city of Bari, sailors and merchants gather in secret. They are devout men, but practical ones too. They fear that Myra's treasures will fall into foreign hands, and they vow to bring Nicholas's relics safely to Christian lands. Some call it theft. Others call it deliverance. So, one spring morning, the ships of Bari set sail. Their white sails catch the wind, cutting across the blue of the Adriatic. The sailors reach Myra under the guise of pilgrims. They kneel, pray, and then, by torchlight, open the saint's tomb. Inside, they find the bones fragrant with the same sweet oil that has flowed for centuries. Carefully, reverently, they lift them into a silver chest and carry them to their waiting ship. When the ships reach Bari weeks later, bells ring across the city. The people flood the docks, weeping with joy. The relics are carried through the streets beneath golden banners, accompanied by music and incense. San Nicola! San Nicola! The people cry. The bones are placed in a new crypt beneath a grand basilica built in his honor, the Basilica di San Nicola, which still stands today. And so, Nicholas of Myra becomes Nicholas of Bari, his light rekindled in a new home. From that day onward, his feast on December 6th spreads swiftly across Europe. In the centuries that follow, devotion to St. Nicholas flourishes like ivy over old stone. From Italy to England, from the frozen rivers of Russia to the coasts of France, his name is spoken with love. Medieval sailors carve his image into the bows of their ships, believing he will calm the seas. Merchants hang his icons in their stalls to protect their trade. In the countryside, farmers pray for his blessing over their animals and harvests. But perhaps his greatest devotion comes from children. They hear the stories of the 3 golden coins tossed through the window, and they adore the saint who gives gifts in secret. On the eve of his feast, children place shoes or wooden bowls by the hearth, hoping St. Nicholas will pass by in the night. In the morning, they awake to find small gifts, nuts, apples, sweets, or coins, left by unseen hands. It becomes known as St. Nicholas Eve, a night of wonder and whispering winds. In towns and villages, families gather by candlelight to sing hymns of the kind bishop, and in churches, priests read tales of his miracles. Across Europe, his image evolves. In the East, he is painted as a serene bishop in flowing robes of crimson and gold, holding a gospel book and blessing with his right hand. In the West, he appears more human, kind-faced, sometimes aged, sometimes young, always gentle. By the 12th century, hundreds of churches bear his name. Sailors pray to him before voyages, children before sleep, prisoners before judgment. He becomes the patron of travellers, merchants, orphans, and the unjustly accused. His feast day is marked by candlelight and bells, not of sorrow, but of joy. In monasteries, monks copy illuminated manuscripts telling of his wonders, how he calmed storms, healed the sick, even saved a city from famine. In one such tale, Nicholas appears to sailors lost in a tempest, shining with light and saying only, "Fear not, for I am with you." By the high Middle Ages, his name is spoken from the Baltic to the Pyrenees. Pilgrims travel to Bari to venerate his relics, returning home with tiny vials of the saint's manna, a fragrant liquid drawn from his tomb churches, begin to dramatize his miracles in Saint Nicholas plays, early pageants that bring his kindness to life. In England, France, and Germany, the boy-bishop tradition emerges. On December 6th, a child from the choir is chosen to dress as a bishop and lead ceremonies for the day, a symbolic reminder that humility and innocence are closer to holiness than power. The towns fill with laughter and music, the air sweet with spiced bread and honeyed wine. The medieval world, so often marked by hardship, finds warmth in his story. For one night each year, the boundaries between rich and poor, lord and servant, seem to soften. A coin left in a shoe, a loaf given to a beggar, all in honour of Nicholas, the secret giver. Even kings and queens honour him. In France, Duke Philip of Burgundy builds a chapel in his name. In England, more than 400 parish churches are dedicated to him, including one in London by the old docks, a place where sailors pray before setting off on dangerous voyages. Meanwhile, in Russia and the Slavic lands, Saint Nicholas becomes one of the most venerated saints of all. The Orthodox Church calls him Nicholas the Wonder Worker. His icons are carried into battle, placed in homes and kissed by generations of believers. To this day, Russian villagers still tell tales of Nikolai Chudotvorets, the miracle worker who walks unseen through snow and shadow, guarding travellers from harm. As the Middle Ages wane, the world begins to change again. The Church's power wanes, and the Renaissance dawns. Scholars look to ancient learning, merchants to global trade. But through every change, Saint Nicholas remains. His feast day continues to bring joy in the darkest month of the year. In the candlelight of December, as the cold creeps across Europe, people still gather to honour the man who gave in secret. The glow of his story spills from monasteries to marketplaces, from cathedrals to cottages. The saint who once walked the warm streets of Myra now lives in the hearts of millions. But the world is about to enter an age of division, a storm that will sweep across Europe and shake even the saints from their pedestals. In the 1500s, the Reformation will challenge old traditions, and many of the beloved saints of Christendom will fade from Protestant lands. And yet, somehow, Saint Nicholas will endure. He will change his robes, change his name, even change his country. But his spirit will not be broken. He will wander through the snow-clad forests of Germany, through Dutch canals, through English hearths, and finally across the ocean itself to a new world. There, his story will begin anew, transformed into something both ancient and wonderfully familiar. So, as our candle burns low and the wind hums softly beyond the window, we close this chapter with the ringing of church bells across medieval Europe. Bells calling not for war, nor for kings, but for kindness. Because even as centuries pass, the message of Saint Nicholas remains the same. Give quietly, love freely, and keep the warmth of goodness alive, even in the coldest of winters. Section 3. The Reformation and the Northern Winters. The candle flickers low as our story moves northward, away from the sunlit shores of the Mediterranean, into lands of frost and evergreen forests, where December nights stretch long and deep. It is the dawn of a new age, the 1500s, and Europe stands at the edge of great change. For more than 1,000 years, the name of St. Nicholas has been whispered in prayer, sung in hymns, and celebrated with joy. But now, the world is shifting. The Reformation sweeps across the continent like a cold wind, questioning the old traditions of the Church. Statues of saints are taken down feast days, once filled with candles and song fall silent. To the Reformers, the saints belong to an older world, one where miracles mingle with superstition. Yet even as many holy days fade into memory, one saint proves too deeply rooted to vanish. The people cannot let him go. In the hearts of peasants and sailors, merchants and children, Nicholas remains, not as a distant bishop, but as a symbol of kindness, generosity, and winter cheer. His image changes, his customs bend, but the spirit of the man endures. In the Catholic lands, Italy, France, Austria, and the southern parts of Germany, his feast continues, bright as ever. Churches ring their bells on December 6th. Children polish their boots and leave them by the door, waiting for gifts of fruit or sweets. But in Protestant Europe, where devotion to saints is discouraged, Nicholas must find new disguises. In Germany and the Low Countries, he re-emerges in curious new forms, not as a saintly bishop, but as a visitor of the winter nights. Sometimes he is stern, sometimes jolly, sometimes a shadowed figure with a torch in hand. His story splits like candlelight reflected in glass, each land shaping him in its own image. In the Netherlands, he becomes Sinterklaas, the old Dutch name derived from Saint Nicholas. Though no longer celebrated as a saint of the church, he remains a beloved figure in the hearts of the people. On the evening of December 5th, Sinterklaasavond, families gather by the hearth, children singing songs as they set out wooden shoes filled with hay for his horse. Through the night, Sinterklaas rides the rooftops on a white steed, wearing a red bishop's robe and tall mitre, his golden staff glinting in the moonlight. By morning, the hay has vanished, replaced with candies, nuts, and toys. It is said that Sinterklaas travels with a companion, sometimes called Zwarte Piet in later Dutch tales, who helps deliver gifts. Though his portrayal has changed and been debated over time, the pair together represent a simple idea: goodness rewarded, kindness remembered. In the old Netherlands, where winter fog rolls across the canals and bells echo over frozen water, the feast of Sinterklaas becomes a symbol of family warmth, a night when laughter fills the air, and stories of generosity are passed from one generation to the next. Meanwhile, across the sea in England, Saint Nicholas takes on another guise. There, amid the stern voices of reformers and the closing of monasteries, people find new ways to keep alive the spirit of Christmas. Out of the old traditions of feasting and merrymaking arises Father Christmas, not a bishop, but a personification of the season itself. He wears a long robe of green or red, trimmed with fur, and carries a branch of holly. His beard is white as frost, his eyes merry, his laughter booming. He is less about miracles and more about good cheer, the warmth of ale by the fire, the sharing of food with the poor, the joy of community in the darkest days of winter. Father Christmas is not Saint Nicholas exactly, yet he carries his heart within him. In place of relics and cathedrals, he brings hearths and homes. In place of solemn prayers, he brings laughter and generosity. Even as churches grow quieter, English inns and cottages echo with a new kind of celebration: the spirit of giving without the trappings of sainthood. Further east in Germany and Austria, the story takes a darker turn, one that reveals the delicate balance between light and shadow in winter's heart. Here, Nicholas becomes a figure of judgment as well as kindness. He walks through snowy villages on St. Nicholas Eve, carrying a staff and a book of names, one side listing the good children, the other the naughty. But he does not travel alone. At his side come strange companions, half human, half beast, who clatter with chains and rattle sticks. They are called Knecht Ruprecht, Krampus, and other names depending on the region. These figures serve as foils to Nicholas's mercy. While the saint rewards the good, his shadowy helpers warn the disobedient. To the medieval mind, this pairing made perfect sense. The cold of December held both joy and fear, both feasting and famine. Nicholas was the promise that goodness could survive even the harshest season, that light could still shine in the dark. And so, the people loved him all the more. In snowy villages, children peeked from behind shutters, watching for his red cloak as bells jingled down the street. In warm kitchens, mothers baked spiced cookies in his shape, speculatius and pfeffernusse, their scent mingling with pine and smoke. Every year, the legend grew richer, carried by storytellers and song. By the 17th century, Saint Nicholas had become a wanderer, crossing borders, changing names, shifting forms. He was Sinterklaas in Holland, Father Christmas in England, Nicholas in Germany, Mikuláš in Bohemia, and Mikuláš in Hungary. In the snowy lands of the north, his sleigh bells echoed through forests thick with fir trees and candlelight. No longer just a bishop or saint, he had become something larger. The living memory of kindness passed from heart to heart. In the Netherlands, his feast continued to flourish even under Protestant rule. One of the few saintly traditions that could not be erased, Dutch artists painted him in bright red robes. Children learned songs that began, Sinterklaas kapuntje, gooi wat in mijn schoentje. Little Sinterklaas, put something in my shoe. And so, when Dutch settlers later crossed the Atlantic to a new world, they carried Sinterklaas with them. In stories, songs, and simple family traditions. The world was growing wider now. Ships from Europe sailed not just to trade, but to build new lives in the American colonies. Along with them travelled the myths and memories of the old world. In New Amsterdam, the Dutch settlement that would one day be called New York, children still spoke of Sinterklaas, the kindly gift-bringer who rode the rooftops each winter. And though generations would pass, his name would not be forgotten. It would linger on the tongues of poets and storytellers. It would blend with the cheer of Father Christmas, with the folklore of Germany, and the warmth of the old Bishop of Myra. And soon, very soon, Sinterklaas would take on a new name, in a new country, under new stars. He would become Santa Claus. So, as the candlelight trembles upon our book's open page, imagine the map before us. Europe in winter, dotted with flickering lights. In each small village, a different version of Nicholas walks the snow. A bishop, a spirit, a father of Christmas, a bringer of joy. The languages change, the customs shift, but the story remains the same. A generous heart, a helping hand, a light against the cold. And from these many faces, a single image will soon emerge, one that will circle the globe, bringing joy to millions. But to reach that point, our story must cross an ocean. So close the shutters tight, dear listener, for the winds are strong tonight. Beyond the waves lies a new world, and there, in the bustling streets of early America, Saint Nicholas is waiting to be reborn. Section 4. Across the Atlantic. The wind howls over the Atlantic, cold and sharp as a blade. Waves crash against the hulls of wooden ships bound for the New World, their lanterns swinging wildly in the dark. Among the sailors and settlers aboard are men and women from Holland, clutching their memories of home. And among those memories, a familiar name whispered to their children on winter nights, Sinterklaas. They carry him not in statues or relics, but in stories, small glowing embers of tradition meant to warm a strange, untamed land. When they reach the shores of New Amsterdam, the Dutch colony that will one day be called New York, they build churches and houses along the harbour and hang stockings by their hearths. Each December, children speak his name with sleepy excitement, hoping that Sinterklaas will find them even here, across the sea. In the 1600s, the streets of New Amsterdam are narrow and muddy, lined with gabled houses and flickering lanterns. On winter nights, families gather around fires as snow drifts past their windows, telling the same tales they once heard in Europe. Sinterklaas rides through the sky, they whisper. He sees every child, and he rewards the good. The language of the settlers changes with time. Dutch words blend with English. Sinterklaas becomes Sant Klaas, and eventually Santa Claus. It is a quiet transformation, unremarkable at first, just the soft bending of syllables across generations. But like a snowflake forming around a single crystal, the name will gather meaning until it becomes something entirely new. By the 1700s, New Amsterdam has long since become New York City, a bustling port where ships from every nation dock and unload their goods. The old Dutch families remain, proud of their heritage, still telling the stories of the bishop who brought gifts to children each December. Yet the wider world is changing fast. The new America is a land of industry and revolution, of reason and independence. Ancient saints seem out of place in this modern age. And so, Saint Nicholas begins to fade into memory once again. Not gone, but sleeping beneath the noise of new ideas. Then, in the early 1800s, a quiet revival begins. In 1809, the writer Washington Irving publishes a playful book called A History of New York, written under the name of Diedrich Knickerbocker. Between its humorous pages, Irving includes a curious description of the old Dutch Saint Nicholas, not as a solemn bishop, but as a merry, pipe-smoking figure who soars through the sky in a wagon, dropping gifts down chimneys. It is the first spark of the Santa we know today. Irving's Saint Nicholas is whimsical and warm, a comforting figure who belongs to both the old world and the new. New Yorkers, charmed by the nostalgia, begin to celebrate him once more. In 1822, this image takes root even deeper when another man, Clement Clark Moore, a professor of theology, writes a poem for his children on Christmas Eve. He titles it A Visit from Saint Nicholas. It begins with words we still know by heart. "'Twas the night before Christmas, when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse." In just 56 lines, Moore reshapes the ancient bishop into something new, a jolly miniature man in fur, travelling not on horseback, but in a sleigh drawn by 8 reindeer. He lands on rooftops, slips down chimneys, and fills stockings with toys. The poem captures the imagination of a young America hungry for wonder. Newspapers print it, families recite it by firelight, and the old Saint of Myra, once a solemn bishop of the East, becomes a cheerful spirit of Christmas joy. As the century unfolds, artists take up their brushes to bring this vision to life. Among them is the political cartoonist Thomas Nast, working in New York during the turbulent years of the Civil War. Between 1863 and 1886, Nast draws dozens of illustrations of Santa Claus for Harper's Weekly. His Santa is round and rosy, draped in fur, living at the North Pole, with elves who help him make toys. Nast gives him his list of naughty and nice children, his workshop, and his reindeer. The red suit, trimmed in white, now so iconic, becomes his uniform of cheer. Through Nast's drawings, Santa becomes not only a figure of fantasy, but also of comfort. A reminder, even in war and hardship, that generosity and joy can endure. The American public embraces him completely. By the late 19th century, Santa Claus is everywhere, in magazines, postcards, and department store windows. Christmas itself begins to evolve from a modest religious observance into a cherished family holiday centered on home, warmth and giving. But for all the commercial trimmings, something deeper remains. The heartbeat of Saint Nicholas's old story. Kindness given freely, joy shared without reward. In the snowy towns of New England, children still hang stockings by the fire, just as children once placed shoes by the hearth in medieval Europe. The details have changed. The bishop's staff replaced by a sleigh bell, the robes by fur. But the meaning endures. Each small gift, each spark of wonder, still carries the echo of that first quiet act. The secret coins slipped through a window in the dark. Santa's world expands with the rise of the Victorian age, a time when Christmas stories, carols, and traditions bloom like poinsettias in the frost. Writers such as Charles Dickens help shape the modern spirit of the holiday, with tales like A Christmas Carol, reminding readers that the season's truest gifts are compassion and generosity. In homes across America and Europe, families begin decorating evergreen trees, a tradition borrowed from German customs, and exchanging presents beneath their glowing branches. And always, somewhere in the background, Santa Claus waits, ready to arrive with a twinkle and a laugh. He has travelled far from Myra and Bari, from the cold monasteries and candlelit cathedrals of the Middle Ages. But in every new chapter, his heart stays the same. By the turn of the 20th century, Santa has become a global traveller, carried in illustrations, songs, and advertisements around the world. His image shifts slightly from country to country, yet his smile remains the same. In England, he mingles once more with Father Christmas, blending the merriment of the old Yuletide spirit with the generosity of the Saint in France. He is Père Noël. In Germany, Weihnachtsmann. In the Nordic lands, Joulupukki. And across oceans and languages, he carries the same quiet message. Goodness is its own reward. As the 20th century dawns, Santa Claus stands firmly at the heart of Christmas, not as a distant bishop or a figure of solemn faith, but as a friend of all who give, love, and believe. Yet there is still one transformation left, one final brushstroke that will fix his image in the world's imagination forever. For in the decades ahead, as art and advertising join hands, the red-robed spirit of Saint Nicholas will step fully into modernity, smiling from magazine covers, painted on store windows, and glowing in the electric light of a new age. But even then, beneath the jingling bells and laughter, he will still be what he always was, the man from Myra, the giver of secret gifts. So, as our candle burns lower and the snow deepens outside, we close this chapter on Santa's arrival in America, his rebirth from legend into living symbol. And when we open the next, we'll see how his image was shaped and shared, until it circled the entire globe, not as myth or miracle, but as a reflection of the most enduring miracle of all, the joy of giving. Section 5. The Image of Santa. The snow is falling softly now, thick and slow, like feathers from a winter sky. Our candle flickers lower, its light dancing across the old red book. And as we turn the next page, the world around us begins to hum with the sound of progress. Steam engines thunder across the land, telegraphs click and chatter, and cities glow with the light of gas lamps and industry. It is the 19th century, and the world is changing faster than ever before. Yet through all this noise and invention, one image, one old story, continues to warm the hearts of millions. The story of Saint Nicholas, now known simply as Santa Claus. By now, he has travelled from Myra to Bari, from Europe to America, from whispered prayers to printed poems. But it is in this age, the age of art, print and imagination, that Santa truly takes shape. In the 1860s, as the American Civil War rages, an illustrator named Thomas Nast picks up his pen in New York City. He works for Harper's Weekly, a magazine that fills homes across the nation with news and drawings of the world. One winter issue calls for a Christmas image, something to lift the hearts of readers weary from war. Nast begins to sketch. He draws a plump, merry figure with a white beard and fur-trimmed coat, sitting in a camp surrounded by Union soldiers. In his hand, he holds a small puppet of Jefferson Davis, the Confederate president, bound in rope above the scene. The words read, "Santa Claus at the front." It is the first time most Americans will see Santa Claus drawn in full. Over the next 2 decades, Nast continues to refine the image, each illustration adding another brushstroke to the legend. He places Santa's home at the North Pole, inventing a workshop filled with elves. He draws Santa reading his list of good and bad children. He surrounds him with maps, letters and toys, making him both magical and human, an organised spirit of giving in an increasingly modern world. Nast's Santa wears many colours, brown, green, even tan, but always that jolly round face and twinkling eyes. And though the Civil War fades, his Santa remains, carrying a nation from hardship into hope. In the decades that follow, Santa begins to travel once more, this time through the pages of magazines and postcards, carried by trains and steamships to homes around the world. Artists across Europe and America paint their own versions. In Germany, he is drawn tall and solemn, in a long red or green robe, crowned with holly. In England, Father Christmas still wears green, representing the rebirth of life in winter. But in America, Santa grows rounder, merrier, and distinctly red. The reason lies partly in the new art of chromolithography, brightly coloured prints that allow his crimson coat to shine on Christmas cards, and advertisements families frame these cheerful images beside their trees, and children recognise him instantly. He becomes, quite literally, a figure of colour and joy. At the same time, Christmas itself begins to take on a new identity. No longer just a solemn holy day or a village festival, it becomes a celebration of home and hearth. Victorian families gather around Christmas trees strung with candles and sweets. Mothers read stories aloud by lamplight. Fathers carve roast goose while snow taps gently at the window. And somewhere, in every storybook and postcard, Santa's laugh echoes like a warm promise. That generosity still matters. That goodness is still worth believing in. As railways and post offices connect distant towns, gifts and letters can travel faster than ever, de Tjaanstadijke, and Santa becomes a symbol of connection itself. He no longer belongs only to one faith or one land. He belongs to everyone who believes in kindness. By the early 1900s, the spirit of Christmas has entered the modern age. Storefronts in bustling cities like New York, London and Chicago glitter with tinsel and lights. Shopkeepers dress as Santa Claus to greet customers, ringing bells on street corners to collect money for the poor. Illustrators continue to refine his look, one of the most famous being J.C. Leyendecker, whose elegant covers for the Saturday Evening Post in the early 1900s depict a sleek, dignified Santa, almost aristocratic, yet always smiling. His red robe deepens, his beard brightens, and his belly grows just a bit rounder. It is during these years that the world settles on Santa's now familiar form. Red suit, white fur trim, black boots, rosy cheeks, and a twinkle that seems to hold every candlelight reflection of Christmas past. Then, in the 1930s, as the Great Depression weighs heavily across the world, a new image of Santa appears, one that will forever define him for generations to come. The Coca-Cola Company, searching for a way to bring cheer during the cold winter months, commissions illustrator Haddon Sundblom to paint a new Santa Claus for their holiday advertisements. Sundblom looks to Clement Clarke Moore's poem for inspiration and sets out to paint not a caricature or saint, but a real, living person, full of warmth and humanity. His Santa is larger than life, yet deeply kind, round-faced, rosy, smiling through a snow-white beard. He holds bottles of Coca-Cola in one hand and toys in the other, his eyes twinkling like starlight. When the paintings appear in magazines across America in 1931, the world falls in love. Sundblom's Santa is not just jolly, he feels alive. You can almost hear the creak of his boots, the rustle of his red suit, the gentle ho 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 echoing from his lips. This Santa becomes the Santa, the definitive image of the holiday spirit. And though the colours of marketing helped shape him, his soul remains the same. The quiet, timeless kindness of Saint Nicholas of Myra. Through the 1940s and 1950s, his image spreads even further, through films, radio and television. Songs like Santa Claus is coming to town and here comes. Santa Claus fill the airwaves. Movie screens glow with his stories, from Miracle on 34th Street to Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. He becomes more than a holiday figure. He becomes a universal symbol of joy, generosity, and wonder. Children around the world now write letters addressed simply to Santa Claus, North Pole. Postal workers, inspired by the saint's legacy, answer thousands of them with kindness in schools, communities and homes. People organize toy drives and charity campaigns. Each act of giving echoing that long-ago gesture of gold coins tossed through a poor man's window. As the 20th century unfolds, Santa's image continues to evolve, but his spirit never wavers. Artists in every corner of the globe paint him in their own style, sometimes sleek and modern, sometimes traditional and storybook. In Japan, he's known as Santa-san. In Latin America, Papa Noel. In Finland, he lives at Korvatunturi, Ear Mountain, where he listens to the wishes of children. But wherever he goes, the message remains constant. A message first whispered 17 centuries ago in a small coastal town called Myra. that the greatest gift is to give without expecting anything in return. And so, as the century draws to a close and electric lights replace candles in windows, Santa still rides through the dark winter sky, not just as a man in red, but as the embodiment of something eternal. He is the memory of generosity that has survived empires and ages, the echo of a bishop's compassion reborn in colour and song. The faces around him have changed. Artists, advertisers, storytellers. But beneath them all, the same steady heart beats on. For in every act of kindness, in every quiet gift, in every spark of joy shared in December's cold, there lives the spirit of Saint Nicholas. And though the snow may pile deep and the nights grow long, that spirit continues to shine, as bright as ever, as warm as ever, as endless as hope itself. When we turn the next page, dear listener, our journey will near its end. The world knows Santa's face. But what of the spirit that began it all? In our final chapter, we'll trace that golden thread back to its source, to the message that has never dimmed, that generosity, humility, and love are gifts that outlast every season. So, draw your blanket close, and let's follow the glow one last time into the quiet heart of winter, where the true spirit of Saint Nicholas endures. Section 6. The Spirit Endures. Outside, the snow has deepened. The candle burns low, its wax pooled in a small halo of gold. The old book lies open before us, its final pages waiting to be turned. The world outside our little window is still, the kind of stillness that comes only on a winter's night, when everything is hushed beneath a blanket of white. And as we listen to that quiet, we remember the journey we've taken, across centuries and oceans, through empires and poems, from bishop to legend, to the jolly bringer of cheer we know today. But even now, after all these transformations, one thing remains unchanged. The spirit of Saint Nicholas, that quiet goodness, that secret generosity, endures. In the world we live in today, his name takes many forms. In France, he is Père Noël, the kindly father of Christmas, who slips through snowy streets bearing gifts. In Finland, he is Joulupukki, the Yule goat, riding through frozen forests with a sleigh full of joy. In Russia, he becomes Ded Moroz, Grandfather Frost, accompanied by his granddaughter Snegorochka, delivering presents beneath the shimmering lights of the New Year's trees. And yet, behind every name, every costume and custom, there lingers the same heart. The same man from long ago who slipped a pouch of gold through a poor man's window so that 3 daughters might have hope. His story has become 1,000 stories. His kindness has taken 1,000 shapes. Wherever a child finds a gift in a stocking, wherever a sailor prays for safe passage, wherever someone gives quietly without asking for anything in return, there the spirit of Saint Nicholas still walks. In some places, that spirit is celebrated not with chimneys and sleighs, but with service and song. In towns and cities across the world, people gather on St. Nicholas Day, December 6th, to share food, clothes and coins with those in need. In Austria and Germany, children still polish their boots and leave them by the door, hoping for sweets by morning. In small Russian villages, candles still burn before his icon, painted with the same gentle eyes that once looked out over Myra's harbour. And in America, where his image has grown larger than life, his message quietly persists, hidden in the jingling of Salvation Army bells, in the toy drives at schools, in the quiet envelopes slipped into charity boxes. Saint Nicholas, it seems, has found a way to live wherever people remember how to give. Even the traditions that may seem the most modern, the bustling malls, the twinkling lights, the colourful wrapping paper, still carry echoes of his timeless generosity. Every gift exchanged between friends, every visit to a neighbour, every act of kindness to a stranger, they are all tiny reflections of the same light that burned in a bishop's heart 1700 years ago. Nicholas gave not because it was expected, not to be thanked or remembered, but because someone needed help, and he could give it. That simple truth has survived every transformation, every translation, every retelling. It is why his story still matters. Today, more than 17 centuries after his death, the Basilica of St. Nicholas still stands in Bari, Italy. Pilgrims come from all corners of the world to kneel at his tomb. There, in the dim glow of candlelight, a clear liquid still seeps from the marble, the manna of Saint Nicholas, the same fragrant oil first seen in Myra. Bottled carefully each year, it is said to carry blessings to all who receive it. Scientists call it condensation, believers call it a miracle. But either way, it is something extraordinary, a sign that, even in stone, goodness finds a way to endure. And above the basilica, carved into the ancient arches, the Latin words read, Sancte Nicolae, ora pro nobis. Saint Nicholas, pray for us. Perhaps, though, the truest prayer he ever offered is the one he still whispers through time, not in words, but in deeds. For every winter that comes, he seems to return again, not to be worshipped, but to remind us what generosity truly means. It's in the teacher who brings a coat for a child who has none, in the neighbour who shovels an elderly friend's walk before dawn, in the stranger who pays quietly for someone's meal without being seen. Each small act of kindness is like a candle in the dark, and together they light the world anew each December. That, dear listener, is the true miracle of Saint Nicholas. It's easy to think of Santa Claus as a symbol of fantasy, of ribbons and reindeer, of snowflakes and sleigh bells. But beneath all the glitter and laughter is something far older and infinitely real. A reminder that compassion is not bound by faith, century, or form. The spirit of St. Nicholas belongs to anyone who believes that love should be given freely, that joy should be shared, and that a single act of kindness can change the course of a life. When we give, we echo him. When we forgive, we follow him. When we look upon another's need and quietly fill it, we keep his story alive. And though his name has travelled far, from Myra to Bari, from Sinterklaas to Santa Claus, his heart has never strayed. So, as the hour grows late and the last log in the hearth burns to embers, imagine the world outside your window. Across continents and generations, lights are twinkling. Candles in churches, lanterns in streets, strings of golden bulbs wrapped around trees. Each one glows with a single purpose, to remind us that warmth still exists in winter, and hope still breathes in the cold. If you listen closely, you might even hear it. The faint sound of distant bells, the laughter of children, the whisper of snow against the roof. It is the sound of Saint Nicholas passing by once more, not on a sleigh, but in the hearts of those who give. And now, as our candle finally gutters and the night settles into silence, we close the old red book. Its cover creaks softly, like an old door shutting against the wind. We have walked beside a man who lived 17 centuries ago, who left no empire, no inventions, no armies, only kindness. And somehow, that kindness has proven stronger than time itself. For empires fall, and languages fade, and even stars grow dim. But a single act of love can outlast them all. So sleep well, dear listener. Outside the snow still falls, gentle and slow. May your heart be light, your home warm, and your dreams bright with wonder. And as you drift into the quiet peace of this winter's night, remember, the spirit of Saint Nicholas is not a story to be told once a year. It is a way to live, every day, in every small act of grace. And so, as the last candlelight flickers and fades, may we all carry a little of his spirit within us, the spirit of Saint Nicholas.